Urusei Yatsura was and is a very popular manga. Being published for nearly a decade and selling over 35 million copies is for sure no small feat. But the manga alone is not why Urusei Yatsura takes up such a large space in the public consciousness of 80s Japan. It was the anime series airing on Fuji TV every Wednesday at 7:30 PM that took Urusei Yatsura from being a hit manga to a multimedia juggernaut. In this video, we're going to see how the young crew working on this adaptation came together, some of their early struggles, and ultimately how the anime improved upon the source material to become a genuine, if somewhat flawed, classic. Much of the information from this video will be taken from old interviews, which will be available in the description. Now, let's turn the clock back. It's the middle of 1981, and Rumiko Takahashi has been seeing a lot of success in manga. Not only has her first series, Urusei Yatsura, gone from being planned as a short 10 or so chapter series to approaching its 80th chapter, but she had even launched a second serial, Meisani Koku, in a slightly older oriented magazine Big Comic Spirits back in 1980. Remarkably, she has managed to do this while still in college, which might explain why Urusei Yatsura was initially published sporadically before kicking into high gear around 1980. With her being one of Shogakukan's newest stars, it would only be a matter of time before she made the leap from pages of Weekly Shonen Sunday to Japanese televisions nationwide. There was one question on everyone's minds, of course. Who would be responsible for undertaking that monumental task? Luckily, Takahashi knew a guy. Back when she was still studying at Gekiga Sanjuku, Takahashi met up with a fellow student by the name of Shigekazu Oshii. After graduating, he went on to join a small production house by the name of Kitty Films. Originally founded in 1972 as a subsidiary of Polydor and MCA going by the name of Kitty Music Corporation, it specialized in soundtracks of television and film dramas, starting with Hajimete no Tabi in 1972. But over the course of a decade, the company grew more ambitious and by 1979 was making live-action features themselves, notably Lady Oscar, an adaptation of the groundbreaking series The Rose of Versailles. But it was in 1981 that they wanted to expand further, this time in the anime production themselves. And with Oshii now working as a planner for the company, he saw his former classmates' enormous success in manga as the perfect foundation for Kitty's first anime. However, Kitty did not produce any anime themselves, rather acting more as a middleman for smaller studios who did the actual productions, and so Kitty teamed up with a similarly young company, Studio Pierrot. If Kitty Films was a child, Studio Pierrot was a baby by comparison. Founded in 1979 by former employees of Tatsunoko Production and Mushi Production, they had only one series under their belt, The Wonderful Adventures of Nils, an adaptation of a 1906 Swedish novel, and that had recently wrapped up production with the final episode airing on March 17, 1981. After a few months, they got the call from Kitty and began working on Urusei Yatsura. However, Kitty themselves hadn't even gotten approval for this animated broadcast yet, as Urusei Yatsura seems to have been difficult to get a sponsor for at the time, as while it was popular, it was still being made by the unproven mangaka. So, while work on Urusei Yatsura began in July, it took until August 22nd for the series to officially get approval to air on Fuji TV to premiere on October 14th at 7:30 PM. Even though Pierrot started early, they were still running on an accelerated schedule, as while the norm was to start production 6 months before broadcast, Urusei Yatsura only had about half that. As you can imagine, this was going to be a bumpy ride for everyone involved. Yuji Nunokawa, the founder of Pierrot, immediately set upon making the Urusei Yatsura anime a reality, and for that he assembled a staff that would become legendary in their own right. However, they didn't have a lot to go on in terms of the story, as only the first 4 tankobon volumes had been released, covering the first 36 chapters. One of the key figures of the development of the early series was Akemi Takada, personally picked by Nunokawa to become the character designer for the series, partially because both her and Takahashi were women. An important step in this early stage of production was settling on the designs of the characters for the anime. Urusei Yatsura was only sporadically published in color, and even more rarely in full watercolor, so many of the characters had inconsistent color designs. A notable decision was to make Lem's hair color green. While her hair was iridescent in the manga, this would have been nearly impossible to animate at the time. As before animation began, studios prepared a color chart detailing the colors that are able to be used in the anime itself, as every new color meant having to buy a whole new set of paints for the animation staff. So Takada picked a dark green, almost turquoise hair for Lem's hair that had become iconic, as she felt it complemented her bikini well. Most of the other main characters' colors are picked in a similar manner. Another difficulty for Takada was actually deciding on the designs of the main cast. Takahashi's early work for Urusei Yatsura, while well framed and drawn, is definitely somewhat inconsistent, so Takada had to copy various faces from the manga and refine them until the final design was chosen. In fact, the show's first opening and ending, with the opening sticking around all the way until the middle of 1983, were likely the first pieces of animation completed. This is because many of the early designs and colors of the characters in these not actually reflect how they appeared in the show. While designs of the characters and the world around them began to take shape, one man took the lead in adapting Rumiko's stories, and he will become a legend. Mamoru Oshii was still pretty fresh in the industry when he was brought on to direct Urusei Yatsura, having only worked at Tatsunoko Production for 4 years as a storyboard artist and part-time director, before moving on to the newly founded Studio Pierrot in 1980. Being brought on to work on Urusei Yatsura was a tough challenge, as the aforementioned time crunch, as well as a limited budget since Studio Pierrot was a young studio simultaneously working on another manga adaptation, meant that the atmosphere of Studio Pierrot could best be described as hectic. Many of the employees were in their late teens or early 20s, having to pull all-nighters just to complete episodes. Also worth noting was the opening theme, Lum No Love Song, sung by Yuko Matsutani. With Kitty's roots as a music company and having connections to major record labels, Urusei Yatsura became one of the first anime to have the opening and ending themes be important in of themselves, with these songs being vehicles to promote these up-and-coming artists like Matsutani. Despite all the troubles throughout production, everything was able to come together at the end, and the first episode aired on Fuji TV on October 14th. Interestingly, this is actually Studio Pierrot's third adaptation, as the aforementioned other adaptation, this being of Miss Machiko, aired slightly earlier in the month on TV Tokyo on October 8th, and you can often see the shows paired together in magazines of the time. Going on a bit of a tangent here, but Miss Machiko is a show I would definitely not consider a classic, considering it really just revolves around a bunch of elementary schoolers groping their teacher. Somehow, despite only having one joke, the show managed to last for 95 episodes. I don't even know how the hell they did that. I will share one interesting fact about the series though. The show had a few voice actors who were also a part of Urusei Yatsura, but the most notable one I found was Shigeru Chiba, who played the role of Yamagata Sensei, a colleague to the main girl who obsesses over her but never has any success with actually getting with her. Sound familiar? I always thought that was an interesting connection. If you guys want to make a video about the series, leave a comment, it'd be interesting for sure. Now back to what we're here for, Urusei Yatsura. With Oshii at the helm, things looking up for the young series. There was one major change for the anime from the manga that had a key impact in the series. Ten, a character introduced pretty well into the manga chapter 63, was added to the cast of the anime as early as the second episode. This may have been due to the fact that in the manga he quickly became part of the main cast, and so it wasn't too difficult to adapt many of the early stories of him being added, or it could simply be that he was a cute baby character that may have made the show more appealing to families. Besides that, Oshii generally stuck pretty close to Rumiko's writing for the early episodes. No episodes were adapted in a very random order, something that stuck with the series throughout its entire run. The show's early episodes, looking at them now, feel entirely different from the rest of the series, but now with the prior analysis, we can see that they are very much the result of circumstances surrounding their production. Another way these early episodes stuck close to the manga was how they were generally two 11-minute episodes packed together. a choice made probably to be able to get through more of the story on the limited budget and production schedule they had, as well as fitting the fast storytelling structure of the manga. A part of the production crew that I hadn't mentioned were the composers. One of the most memorable aspects of the Urusei Yatsura anime was its soundtrack, as it had a distinct late 70s/80s electronic feel. Some of the notable composers who worked on the series include Shinsuke Kazuo, Koji Nishimura, and Fumikata Anzai, who even has his own YouTube channel where he posts how he composed these songs originally. Anyways, the production crew forged on, occasionally making longer 22-minute episodes such as the famous Christmas special Pitter Patter Christmas Eve. This part of the anime was capped off by the spring TV special, which gave a recap of the series up to that point as well as the adaptation of the 3-chapter saga involving Kaede the Shinobi. Urusei Yatsura's style quickly began to evolve after the initial 21 episodes. The show transitioned permanently to a full 22-minute format in the spring of 1982, which helped give the stories more breathing room, such as the adaptation of the deranged marriage arc. The show's budget also seems to have increased, as you can see the characters' designs become more refined. Oshii was still sticking pretty close to Takahashi's work, but you get the sense that he's beginning to insert his own style in, such as in the library episode. Packed with references to tanks and Wehrmacht soldier style become a hallmark of his future works. By the time we get to episode 44, After You've Gone, widely regarded as one of the best episodes of the entire series, the show felt completely different from how it started. Unlike in previous single-chapter adaptations, Oshii expanded upon Takahashi's original work, giving it a more grounded, mature feeling. It also had a cinematic styling that simply didn't exist in Takahashi's manga, such as Ataru's despaired walk throughout the city. It was during this time that work began on the first movie, Only You. While I won't cover any of the movies in depth during this video, what's important to know is that the show, while having a slight decline in production values, probably due to overhead of working on the movie simultaneously to the weekly episodes, emerged stronger afterwards, as the staff at Prologue really began to settle into their groove. Oshii, by the way, was brought on to direct that movie after the previous director quit, and while making a film that felt very close to the style of Takahashi, but notably not writing a script himself that was the work of Tomoko Kanparu, Oshii did not enjoy the process in the slightest, which may explain the tone shift of his directing style afterwards. Through the end of 1982 and into 1983, the show continued to release classic episodes one after another, and a few aspects of the anime series began to be emphasized more, such as Megane, who had the spotlight in episode 64. The introduction of Ryunosuke also happened not too long after her first manga appearance, showing up in episode 63. But it was really with the first set of anime original episodes like 71, 75, and 78 that we can see Oshii's style truly come into its own. These episodes were quite serious in tone, with philosophical elements and introspective storytelling that made it feel completely different to the fast-paced gag stories Takahashi was still writing. More and more of these anime original episodes began to appear throughout 1983, and even adaptations of chapters from the manga had Oshii stylings and didn't feel very close to their manga counterparts. This growing stylistic departure would find its culmination in the second film Beautiful Dreamer, which also had a difficult development. Notably, Oshii actually wrote the script this time and had no oversight from Takahashi herself, and so the movie, while widely regarded as the best movie in the whole series, felt nothing like the original manga stories and didn't even feature many of the characters. These development struggles, involving half of the television staff moving to work on the movie, can be seen with episodes released not too long before and after the movie looking very cheap, and even featuring multiple clip shows, the only time the series will resort to such measures. While Beautiful Dreamer performed well in the box office, many fans are outraged that the movie they went to see was nothing like the previous one. With Oshii being threatened, both by fans of the series as well as the staff at Pro wanting him to change his styling to be more in line with Takahashi's writing, Oshii decided to depart the series, but not before giving some of his best work. Scramble to the Rescue Lum, the only two-part episode in the whole series, gives leading roles to stormtroopers as Taro and Mendo face off like never before. The episode feels almost like a movie with how cinematic it is, and is truly one of the high watermarks of this series. Oshii left behind a complex legacy. On one hand, he was able to adapt and even improve on Takahashi's writing by giving additional depth and complexity to many of the characters. On the other hand, he used the characters of Urusei Yatsura to tell artsy, existential stories that often felt entirely foreign to Takahashi's original vision. Arguably, his most important legacy to the series would be leaving behind a talented crew with multiple features behind them who were more than ready for any challenges they faced. All they needed now was a new leader to keep the show moving forward throughout the mid-80s. With the departure of Oshii around the halfway point of the series, big changes are being made at Kitty Film. For one, Studio Pro was out, being replaced by Studio Dean, a similar young studio founded in 1975 by ex-members of Sunrise. At this point, Studio Dean had only been assisting other studios, like Studio Pro, and their run on Urusei Yatsura became their first series they worked on independently. But arguably the biggest change was the replacement of director of the series, with Kazuo Yamazaki stepping up to the plate. His first animation work on the series was all the way back on episode 44, doing storyboards and being the animation director for that landmark episode. Luckily, by the time he took over directing Urusei Yatsura in the spring of 1984, he was more than ready to make a splash, with his first episode being the fan-favorite Dimensional Switch Where's Darling. While it was an anime original and had a somewhat serious story, it felt markedly different from Oshii's original episodes, with a lighter tone and a touching ending. With the success of two blockbusters behind him, Yamazaki and the staff at Dean were fortunate to have a very high budget for these episodes, and you can tell with just how clean they feel. Another Yamazaki anime original episode that's a fan favorite is episode 112, Ben 10 and Ryunosuke Run for Tomorrow. A homage to Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, this episode paired up Ben 10 and Ryunosuke before the actual manga did, and arguably did a better job at it with a fun adventure for these two action girls. Yamazaki's direction on the series leaned closer to the manga, even if he did keep around what were now hallmarks of the anime like the Stormtroopers. It represented the detente of sorts between Takahashi and the anime staff. These episodes may not have had the depth and complexity of Oshii's, but they were fun, creative romps throughout Takahashi's world. Asuka was also introduced during this time, only around half a year after she came into the manga. There are even some anime original sequel episodes, such as the return of Katie over 100 episodes later, being paired up with Mendo and Ryoko this time. During this time, Yamazaki directed the third Urusei Yatsura film, Remember My Love. It can be seen just how adept the staff of the series was by this point, as there was no obvious decline in terms of the animation within the series. Remember My Love was also a return to form in terms of storytelling, with a somewhat more grounded story featuring the majority of the characters from the show. Yamazaki's Urusei Yatsura also featured a lot more different openings and endings, with all of them looking and sounding great. Yamazaki forged on throughout 1985, creating many classic episodes during this time. There's honestly not a lot to say about this point in the series, it just kept up its constant quality throughout the year. He also directed the fourth film, Lum Live Forever, which in many ways feels like Yamazaki's Beautiful Dreamer, being a similarly out there film centered around Lum. The film released right as the series was wrapping up production early 1986, though curiously, some of the very last episodes were adaptations of chapters from quite early on in the manga, which makes the characters feel a little regressed. After showing After You've Gone again as the winner of a viewer poll for the fan favorite episode, the final episode of Urusei Yatsura's original television run, 195, while on the surface an adaptation of the unremarkable chapter 105, Sun Goddess Banquet, turns into a love letter to the entire series of many one-shot characters having cameos, and finally ending with one last rendition of the first ending theme, showing how truly weird space is. With a groundbreaking 4.5-year run, Urusei Yatsura on television was finally done. With production on Urusei Yatsura finished, a majority of the staff at Dean, including Yamazaki, moved on to adapting Rumiko's second series, Meisani Koku, with its first episode airing only a week after Urusei Yatsura ended in its original time slot. You can imagine just how much work the staff at Dean was doing, not only adapting the last set of Urusei Yatsura episodes, but also both creating all of the new backgrounds, soundtracks, and character designs for Meisani Koku, as well as finishing up work on Lambda Forever. It's truly an achievement that all these came out with such high quality. The Urusei Yatsura manga, the one that started it all back in 1978, forged on for another year after the anime ended. And soon after it finished up with one massive volume-length story in 1987, the story was adapted into the 5th Urusei Yatsura film, The Final Chapter. Being the only film to be directly adapted from Takahashi's original work, it was not only very accurate to the manga as a result, but showed just how far Takahashi's writing had come by this point, as this movie was truly cinematic. It premiered alongside Meisani Koku, The Final Chapter, in early 1988, as that series had also wrapped up recently on television. Rumiko herself moved on to work on Ranma 1/2, with the anime series for that soon following, but Urusei Yatsura stuck around, mostly in the form of OVAs, which adapted some of the later chapters the anime never got around to. What he started off quite good with Nabata Dreammaker and Rage Sherbert being some of my favorites, they began to be passed from studio to studio, and as a result not only looked extremely distinct from each other, but they also kinda look bad in my opinion. I mean, this one just looks like crap, I'm sorry, it does not look good. For some reason, a 6th film was made, this time by Studio Madhouse, Always My Darling. Being a 10th anniversary film for the anime, not only was it by far the shortest of any of the films at only 74 minutes, it felt more like a glorified OVA with the characters seemingly regressing their development to long before the previous film. It was also just strange that they even made another one, considering the last film was The Final Chapter. What are they doing now? It was clear that the filmmakers are beating a dead horse by this point, and Takahashi decided to cancel production on all future Urusei Yatsura animated projects to the end of 1991, leaving the series dormant for decades. It was only in 2008 with the Rumik World OVAs and a 2022 soon-to-be-released reboot that Urusei Yatsura has come back into the limelight in animated form. Looking back on the series as a whole, one of the most interesting aspects of the original anime was just how many animation the directors it had. Take a guess. 5? 10? Maybe even 15? How about 29? Each of these directors gave their own flair to the series, and simply present a selection of each of their works on the series, so you can see just how big of an impact each of them had on the way the series looked. This will be in alphabetical order with the anime, so I hope you enjoy it. Urusei Yatsura wouldn't be the cultural juggernaut it is in Japan if it wasn't for the anime. During and after the run of the show, you had things like video games, figures, board games, shitty LCD games, even a stage show for some bizarre reason, all of which would not be possible if it wasn't for the anime. Oshii and Yamazaki's depths as directors in the series, in my opinion, objectively improved upon Takahashi's already strong original manga, by giving a greater depth to the extended cast, as well as understanding her characters well enough that some of the all-time favorite episodes among fans of the series are wholly original to the anime. The anime's production in many ways feels like a story of an underdog, starting out having to prove itself on a short timetable and limited budget. We will explore the later works of Oshii, Yamazaki, and Takahashi herself in future videos, but there is a reason why when people point to Japan in the 80s, one of the most well-remembered aspects is that of Urusei Yatsura. As of the making of this video, the 2022 reboot of Urusei Yatsura, All Stars, has yet to be released and won't be for a few more months. I think it could turn out decent. David Pro's animation is solid, the voice actors are by and large well suited to their roles, and the structure of the series adapting some of the best stories from the manga seems solid. But that's the thing, adapting from the manga. Many people, including myself, think the series is going to be a more straight adaptation of the manga, in much the same way Sailor Moon Crystal was to the original anime. In doing that, much of the charm of the original series will be lost. For example, look at the character Kosuke. He's a fine character in the manga, perfectly competent in his role as Ataru's friend, but you can't sit here and tell me that you'd rather have him in the new series than one stormtroopers with the layers of depth and character. It's also the exact opposite development story of the original. Instead of a bunch of plucky underdogs rising to the occasion to make a somewhat popular manga into a cultural icon, you have a series with decades of fans redoing some of their old stories, with the knowledge that it will succeed regardless of the quality just because of the name attached to it. I hope the best for a new series, but even if it turns out to be a flop, we'll always have the original to look back on. Don't forget that.